We only have 6 more archetype analysis to go until we go on to something else. Uh, yeah, we'll be starting off this final session of archetype analysis videos with Noble Knights, used by Sherry in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. And yes, this is another one of those archetypes in which only one card of said archetype was used, and yeah. And not to mention that the card that Sherry used wasn't even related to the archetype in the first place in the name nor in the effect, because, yeah, we'll get to it. But basically, Noble Knights are monsters which are focused on equipping themselves with the so-called Noble Noble Arms equip spells, and they gain very unique and most of the time very pointless effects from them. So yeah, let's take a look at them, shall we? And to see if they're playable, and if they are, for some reason, how playable they are. We start off with their first monster, which is actually a normal monster, that being Noble Knight Archetype. Yeah, this is a level 4 light warrior monster, which is normal monster, which is, yeah, basically the archetype does benefit highly from running it. They have some extra deck monsters which share this guy's name, so yeah, you can also some of them I think even require him as material. I'm not quite sure. We'll see later on, but yeah, you usually run 2 or 3 of these in your Noble Knight deck. But anyway, yeah, now that we've got that out of the way, let's start off with our first actual monster, that being one of and actually their newest piece of support, that being Flame Noble Knight Roland. This is a level 1 warrior with 500 attack and defense, and it has a quick effect that you can target one face-up monster you control, equip this card from your hand to that target you control as an equipped spell card. And that makes it gain 500 attack. During the end phase of the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can add one Fire Warrior monster or one equipped spell from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Flame Noble Knight Roland once per turn. For first of all, the archetype does not have any fire monsters in the main deck whatsoever, and yeah, this is basically useful if you're playing Phoenix Gearfried beatdown deck, which also focuses on equips. But the second effect is actually pretty dang alright, since it actually searches the Noble Arms as equip spells, which is nice, but it also searches out any equip spell, which might, well, open up some versatility. But come on, equip spells are very rarely ran. The ones that are usually ran are part of some twisted FTK loop, or just have very overpowering effects. So yeah, but hey, this guy can search out Premature Burial if it were unbanned, so yeah, there's bonus points for that. But yeah, as for this new piece of support, it was pretty much made for the Gearfried archetype, not this, but a Noble Knight archetype. But yeah, run 1 for style points, I guess. Whatever works for you. Anyway, next up we have Lady of the Lake. Yeah, this is we're already into the part of the archetype where we don't have Noble Knight in the name. But anyway, yeah, this Lady of the Lake is a level 1 tuner with 200 attack and 1,800 defense, and cannot be used as a synchro material except for the synchro summon of a warrior type monster. If this card is used for a synchro summon, banish it. When this card is normal summoned, you can target one Noble Knight normal monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. If this card is in your graveyard, you can target one level 5 Noble Knight monster you control, reduce its level by 1, and if you do, special summon this card from your graveyard. Okay, so the revival effect is specifically limited to Archetype, so you have to basically, this is one benefit for using this. Second of all, it's a tuner monster and an archetype that only has one synchro monster total, and as we'll see later on, this archetype is also focused on XC spamming, not synchro spamming. So yeah, she's a matter of preference most of the time, but I actually do like that she's actually an archetypal level leader who does not have a once per turn effect, so yeah. She's exclusively ran as an archetypal level leader for now because of links and everything, so even if you don't playing, even if you don't play Artorigus or the Synchro monster, you usually run this at 2 or 3 because, well, it's an archetypal level leader. What else can I say? Yeah, it works on higher level Noble Knight monsters, and main deck ones usually don't have high enough levels. So yeah, its usage is a lot more dampened than it used to be. So yeah, the archetype only has, like, I'm gonna count 1, 2, 3 total targets for this thing's effect. So yeah, she's usually she's primarily the reason why you usually run these. And yeah, they're all level 5. Sorry, and to disappoint all of you enthusiasts. So yeah, that's a bit of a bummer there. But anyway, now let's go on to their next monster, that being, what the heck, Gwenifear, I'm gonna call her Gwenifear, Queen of Noble Arms. This is a level 2 spellcaster, which allows you to target one Noble Knight monster you control, equip this card from your hand to or graveyard to that target. You can only use this effect once per turn. The equipped monster gains 300 attack. Apply the appropriate effect depending on the attribute of the equipped monster. Light. If the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy this card instead. Dark. If the equipped monster battles an opponent's monster at the start of the damage step, you can destroy that monster, then destroy this card. A one-shot Ally of Justice Catastor effect is actually really nice, and as we'll see later on, yeah, it's very rarely used because the archetype is dominated by light monsters. They only have a grand total of, a grand total of dark monsters, which are actually have Noble Knights in their name, as we'll see later on. They have some monsters which are dark but don't have Noble Knights in the name. They have 1, 2, 3 total monsters who are dark. So yeah, this basically is ran on the same level as on the Lady of the Lake, if you're really digging her effect. And since there's only 3 targets for this effect, you usually run this at 1 or 2 because it's a less useful effect than Lady of the Lake. So yeah. Next up we have Merlin, their first level 3, and yeah, their first dark monster. You can only use each effect of Merlin once per turn. You can tribute this card, special summon one Noble Knight monster from your deck, and you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Noble Knight monsters. And then we have a quick effect that you can banish this card from your graveyard, and immediately after this resolves, synchro summon one Noble Knight synchro monster using monsters you control. And another quick effect which allows you to banish this card from your graveyard, and immediately after this resolves, special summon one Noble Knight Xyz monster from using monsters you control. You usually don't run this because it's, again, very terrible, as it's a level 3 in an archetype dominated by level 4 monsters. Second of all, the first effect is something I would call very decent, but if it didn't lock you into Noble Knights. Second effect is completely pointless since there is only one synchro monster again in the archetype. And the third effect is decent but overall not necessary, because unless you're using this stuff in your opponent's battle phase to summon something like, I don't know, Utopia to stop an attack, then yeah, it's not very worth it. Although, you're most probably going to use up all of your level 4s for rank 4 plays or link plays by the time this thing hits the graveyard, which is probably at the end of the duel, or not at all since you don't run this thing. Genius. Next up we have the last monster which does not have the Noble Knight in the name, and that's Morgan the Enchantress of Avalon. And it's also their final level 3. When your opponent activates a card or effect while you control a Noble Knight monster and Noble Arms equip spell, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to destroy one Noble Arms equip spell you control, and if you do negate the activation, you can and you can only use this effect once per turn. While it is a decent disruption effect and a decent negation, it kinda goes against the nature of the archetype, as the archetype really relies on these Noble Arms cards staying on the field. So yeah, some of them can even equip the Noble Arms from the deck onto themselves. So yeah, that's how important these cards are to them. So yeah, if you run this, it's probably a very slim one-off. Next up we have their actual first Noble Knight, that being Noble Knight Boards. This card is treated as a normal monster while face up on the field. While equipped with a Noble Arms equipped spell card, this card becomes an effect monster with these effects. This card becomes dark and its level is increased by 1. During your main phase, you can reveal 3 Noble Arms cards from your deck, have your opponent randomly add one of them to your hand, then send the rest to the graveyard. You can only use this effect on Noble Arms boards once per turn. The only relevant usage of this effect is this becoming dark in order to apply the Gwen Queen's effect. Yeah, I already forgot how I nicknamed her, so yeah, Gwen Queen it is. Anyway, yeah, and increasing its level by 1 in order to use Lady of the Lake on him. But everything else is really not worth it because, yeah, you can search out Noble Arms cards, which is nice, but the way it searches out is just a worse Power Tool Dragon, and you might as well be running Power Tool Dragon since it can be a very hard staple in the deck. And not to mention, Power Tool Dragon has a protection these guys wish they have while they have the Noble Arms cards. So yeah, don't run this and just run Power Tool Dragon instead. Next up we have Noble Knight Kastenin. If you control a Noble Arms equip spell, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon Noble Arm Kastenin once per turn this way. A Noble Knight monster that was Synchro or Xyz or Link summoned using this card as a material gains this effect. If this card is special summoned, you can normal summon one Noble Knight monster during your main phase this turn in addition to your normal summon set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except Noble Knight monsters. Alright effect, but I really wish it didn't lock you into Noble Knights because these guys are usually very struggling with consistency, as we'll see later on. And yeah, this is one of the most splashable monsters and definitely a 3-off due to how much benefits he can offer. He can instantly special summon himself upon controlling a Noble Arms card, which we'll see later on is not that hard to do. And on top of it all, it also covers Synchro, Xyz, and Link plays when that monster is used as material. It also grants you an additional normal summon, which is fantastic in my opinion. It also applies on any Synchro, Xyz, or Link monsters, meaning you can actually use it on anything else that Noble Knights go great with, which is. Which actually I advise putting heroic champions in there as well because yeah, they used to kind of struggle with putting Rongominiad on the field, but they actually had some very gimmicky builds which lost 99% of the time, which focused on Rongominiad, and yeah, it was funny to watch, but yeah, it was certainly memorable. But yeah, Kastenin, even though he's a hard once per turn, when special summoning him with its own effect, is definitely a 3-off staple. Next up we have Noble Knight Bedver. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can send one Noble Arms equipped spell from your deck to the graveyard. During either player's turn, you can target one Noble Arms equipped spell card and one appropriate monster in the field. Equip that equipped spell card to that appropriate monster, and this effect can only be used once. Alright, so if this card made any sense, the on-summon effect would be that it equips the Noble Arms equip spell onto himself, straight from the deck. And while the second one is neat, I would actually, it's basically a worse version of Power Tool Mecha Dragon. Yeah, expect Power Tool Dragon to be brought up here multiple times. And not to mention that Power Tool Mecha Dragon also allows you, gives you a free draw when you equip stuff on him. So yeah, it's a hard once per turn, but still, it's much more worth it than this crap. Next up, oh boy, we have Noble Knight Joan. Yeah, look at the sudden hard difference in the artwork. And if you guessed right, yeah, this is the card Sherry used in the anime. And yeah, she was known as Sacred Knight in the anime. That it has actually had a whole sub-archetype called Sacred Knight, and then this gets printed and then gets shoved into the Noble Knight archetype for whatever reason. And yeah, check this shit out. If this card attacks, it loses 300 attack during damage calculation only. Sorry, if this card in your possession is destroyed by your opponent's card, either by battle or card effect, you can send to your graveyard and send to the graveyard. You can send one card from your hand to the graveyard and target one level 4 or lower warrior monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. Yeah, as you can see, this has literally nothing to do with the Noble Knights, and yeah, generic warrior recycling, well, is nice. It's completely out of place here, and oh, it has 1900 attack, and that's totally worth it, right? Yeah, especially since it loses 300 when attacking. Yeah, don't bother. It's a shitty anime card if I ever saw one. Next up we have Noble Knight Dristan. While you control another Noble Knight monster, your opponent cannot target your monsters with with monsters less than 1800 attack. Except this card for attacks or with card effects. If a Noble Arms equip spell is equipped to this card, target one face-up monster on the field, destroy the target. You can only use this effect of Noble Knight Dristan once per turn. This is basically somewhat of a worse version of, well, actually a better version of Obnoxious Celtic Guardian, and as in it redirects attacks on him, and it also basically it stops attacks and card effects on certain category of monsters, and if you happen to have two of these, you make an attack lock. Also, when a Noble Knight card is equipped to it, you can pop a monster on the field. Mind you, it does targets, but yeah, for a level 4 monster, this is perfectly acceptable. Run at least 2 or 3 of these. Next up we have Noble Knight Gvalchavad. What the hell is that? Anyway, yeah, this card is treated as a normal monster while face up on the field, and while equipped with a Noble Arms equip spell, this card becomes an effect monster with this effect. You can target one Noble Knight monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand, and if you do, destroy one Noble Arms equip spell card you control, and you can only activate this once per turn. Yeah, or you might as well just be running Warrior Returning Alive. Yeah, no biggie. It's way faster and it doesn't pop your field, so yeah, don't even bother with this one. Next up we have Noble Knight Gawain. If you control a light normal monster, you can special summon this card from your hand in defense position. Yeah, unlike Noble Knights, which by the way have a tendency of having, which have the honor of having some of the longest card effects in the game. This one has a very short effect because this was one of the very first Noble Knights that ever came out alongside with Artorigus. And not only that, if you control Artorigus, which is a light normal monster, you can special summon him in defense position, which really makes him worth running due to being used as free link material, free exceed material, synchro material, has 1900 attack, which is always welcome on a level 4 monster. But it special summons itself in defense position, but that's a bit of a bummer. Also, this thing works on any light normal monster, meaning you can experiment, whatever that means. But yeah, this is actually a 2 or 3 of staple nonetheless. Next up we have Noble Knight Ivane. However do you pronounce this, yeah. If a Noble Arms equip spell card becomes equipped to this card, you can special summon one Noble Knight token, Warrior Light level 4, 1000 attack, 1000 defense. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except Noble Knight monsters. You can only use this effect once per turn, and while this card is equipped with a Noble Arms equip spell or other Noble Knight monster you control, gain 500 attack. Yeah, this is a token spawner which would be appreciated again if it didn't lock you into goddamn Noble Knights. I'm really hammering this point in, but these guys really have trouble with consistency, and as we'll see later on, their equip spells are the bread and butter of the archetype, and once they are gone, they basically lose any incentive to fight. So yeah, I don't know. Run by preference. I mean, it is a token spawner, but it locks you into Noble Knights, which is very tricky in my opinion. Next up we have Noble Knight Medrot. Okay, Medrot it is. These names are also very confusing for me to pronounce. Also, I'm recording this very late. I just returned from the town and oh boy, I have a headache. Somewhat. This card is treated as a normal monster while face up on the field. While equipped with a Noble Arms equip spell, this card becomes an effect monster with this effect. This card becomes dark and its level is increased by 1. Once per turn, if you control no other monsters, you can special summon one Noble Knight monster from your deck in defense position except Noble Knight Merdod. And if you do, destroy one equipped spell card you control. Again, yeah, it does summon from the deck, but it has to be... I mean, you can open up with this, yeah, surely. And it also turns him into a dark monster along with giving him an additional level for Lady of the Lake to do her thing. And yeah, but it actually is somewhat relevant because it does not lock you into Noble Knights, so that's another plus. Yeah, you do destroy the equip spell, but yeah, that's actually a sacrifice that has to be made. In terms of Swarfather, this is actually one of their best monsters, so yeah, I actually have some positive things to say, and yeah, you usually run 3 of these at all times. Next up we have Noble Knight Pelennor. You can target one Noble Arms equip spell equipped to discard and one face-up monster your opponent controls, destroy them. Then draw 1 card. Also, this card cannot attack for the rest of this turn, and you can only use this effect once per turn. This is alright effect, but again, it relies on destroying your Noble Arms equips, which is something you rarely don't want to do. But it also can get rid of a monster for you, and it also gives you a free card, so he's usually run at 1 or 2, so yeah. Also he has a very decent stats for a level 4, so yeah, nice card. Next up we have Noble Knight Peredur. You while equipped with a Noble Arms equipped spell card, this card becomes dark, and its level is increased by 1. If this card is sent to the graveyard while equipped with a Noble Arms spell card, target one Noble Arms card in your graveyard, add that target to your hand. Yeah, another card which is mostly used because it becomes dark and its level increases by 1 for a Lady of the Lake to hit the field sooner. Yeah, you usually summon this, summon Lady of the Lake, then go into a Synchro, level 5 one of course, and then you search out an equip spell which you can equip to that Synchro, so yeah, tolerable but not impressive, so 1 or 2 of these should be fine. Next up we have Noble Knight Brothers. My brothers, do you know the way? Yeah, I love this meme to death, but yeah, I had to say it. This card can only attack if you can control exactly 3 Noble Knight monsters and no other monsters. When this card is normal summoned, you can special summon up to 2 Noble Knight monsters from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except Noble Knight monsters. Once per turn, you can target 3 Noble Knight and/or Noble Arms cards in your graveyard, shuffle all 3 into the deck, then draw 1 card. This card is actually very impressive, and you also run 3 of these because, yeah, a very asinine attack limitation, which is not understandable, but it does not matter since you're going to be using this as Link Exceeds or Synchro material. Also, it has 2400 defense, which is beyond impressive for a level 4 monster. Second, you can special summon up to 2 Noble Knights from your hand, meaning you can actually swarm the field with... Basically, if you open up with Merdrot, you can basically summon this from the deck, then special summon some more of them from the deck, and you have at least 4 monsters on the field already. So yeah, this is actually, along with Merdot, their best swarming option, so you never run any less than 3. Also offers some nice recycling and draw power, so yeah, this is a nice card. And next up we have their first tribute monster, that being Noble Knight Ishtar. You can banish 2 Noble Knight monsters from your graveyard, special summon this card from your hand or graveyard. You can only use this effect of Noble Knight Ishtar once per turn. A Synchro or Exceeds of a Noble Knight monster using this card as material cannot be negated. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects that when that monster is special summoned. The summoning condition is somewhat costly for the archetype because you don't usually want to drain your resources from the graveyard, and because, well, you'll need them some for the comeback if you can even make one when you shut these guys down. But I actually like the protection benefits this guy gives to the extra deck monsters that you summon using this guy as material. So yeah, you usually run one of these at max because the summoning condition is a bit too costly, but it benefits in giving your extra deck monster some protection. So yeah. And their last main deck monster is Ignoble Knight of Black Land Salin. Another dark level 5 with this one with 2000 attack, and you can send one face-up light normal monster you control to the graveyard. Special summon this card from your hand or graveyard. You contribute one Noble Knight monster. Add one Noble Arms card from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn, and you can only control one of these. This one is. I find the summoning condition to be a bit better than the last one. However, this one requires you to run Archetype, or again, this actually works on any light normal monster. But the downside is you actually have to control him in order to summon this. However, you can circumvent this by actually running 3 Archetype along with Rescue Rabbit and Unexpected Dice. So, yeah. It's also a very this is an interesting fact that you can only control one of these, because I would actually call this a bit better if you can actually control multiples of these because of the special summoning condition. Although you don't usually special summon more than one of these because you want to use at least 2 Archetypes for Xyz or Link play. Also, it has some searching from the deck, which is fine, nothing too amazing, but yeah, it's a very mediocre card. But yeah, you usually run this guy at 1, mostly by preference. And next up, we actually have their synchro monster, their only one, that being Ignoble Knight of Highland Salin. This is a level 5, requires 1 tuner or 1 or more non-tuner Noble Knight monsters, has 2100 attack and 900 defense. And when this card is synchro summoned, you can equip one Noble Arms equipped spell card from your deck to this card. At the end of the battle phase, if this card destroyed a monster by battle and sent it to the graveyard, you can add one Noble Knight or Noble Arms card from your deck to your hand, and you can only control one of these guys. Yeah, this is actually a pretty nice effect for a synchro monster. Basically, each time this card pops a monster by battle, you get to perform a search of, well, literally your entire archetype minus the trap cards and the field spell and some other cards. We'll get to that. But yeah, this is usually ran at 1 or 2, mostly 1, because again, it's their only synchro monster, and the archetype only has 1 tuner. No matter how good it is, it's only a 1 tuner, so they don't have many options available for them. So yeah, and also it specifically requires a Noble Knight monster in order to be summoned. So yeah, it's a bit of a tricky endeavor there. So yeah. Alright, next up we actually have one of their recent pieces of support, the very famous Isolde Two Tails of the Noble Knights, their first Link monster and only Link monster for now. Link 2, 1600 attack. It requires 2 warrior monsters to be summoned, points bottom left and bottom right, and if this card is Link summoned, you can add 1 warrior monster from your deck to your hand. But for the rest of this turn, you cannot normal summon or set special summon monsters with that name, nor activate that monster's effects. You can send any number of equipped spells with different names from your deck to the graveyard. Special summon 1 warrior monster from your deck whose level equals the number of cards sent to the graveyard. You can only use each effect of Isolde Two Tails of the Noble Knight once per turn. This card is actually a very nice masterpiece of design, because this is basically ran in every single warrior spam deck in existence due to massively boosting their consistency, and it actually is the reason why Iron Chains are very playable nowadays. Remember them? I reviewed them ages and ages ago, but anyway, I actually mentioned this card quite a few times during that video because the card is just that good. Basically, it allows you to add any warrior from your deck to your hand upon summon, which is a huge deal since warrior is the most dominant monster type in the game. And combined with Rhoda, it can actually perform some nice searching capabilities. Also, it special summons Noble Knights by sending equipped spells to the graveyard, which you can later recycle with some other support. So yeah, this is an absolute masterpiece, and is usually ran at 3 in all Noble Knights builds. Alright, now going on to the main potatoes, the Xyz monsters. First up we have Sacred Noble Knight of King Castenin. Requires 2 level 4 Noble Knight monsters, has 1500 attack and 2500 defense, and you can detach any number of materials from this card, then target that many cards your opponent controls, return them to the hand. Sorry, it says 2 plus level 4 Noble Knight monsters, sorry. It has a Rongominiat summoning condition, I didn't see it. The picture is very tiny. But anyway, yeah. If this card is destroyed by battle or by card effects and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one Noble Knight Xyz monster from your extra deck, except himself. And if you do, attach this card from your graveyard to that monster's material, and this is treated as an Xyz summon. And you can only use this effect once per turn. So yeah, this is their own archetypal Rongominiad, but yeah, this basically offers mass bouncing. So yeah, you can, which is usually, which can usually be 6 max if you have their synchro monsters out in the extra monster zone, whose level has been reduced by 4 by 1 by the Lady of the Lake, which is a bit too specific, and mostly this guy is usually summoned with 2 or 3 materials. So yeah, which is also pretty decent, but not enough to be a very hard staple due to his very pathetic attack. But yeah, he makes up for it in defense points. But yeah, usually this guy is run at 1 exclusively for the gimmickness of the effect. And yeah, I mean, he can float into another Xyz monster, which is always nice, but that's about as far as it goes. And yeah, 1 is perfectly fine for that kind of feature. Next up we have Artorigus, King of the Noble Knights. Requires specifically 2 level 4 Noble Knight monsters this time, thank you. And when this card is Xyz summoned, you can target up to 3 Noble Arms equipped spell cards with different names in your graveyard, equip those targets to this card. When once per turn you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card, destroy any number of spell or trap cards on the field up to the number of Noble Arms equipped spells you control. Yeah, this is actually, this is one of their first boss monsters, first of all, and yeah, as a first boss monster, it actually looks pretty decent. Basically, it equips up to 3 Noble Arms cards, which can be insanely devastating with the right setup from the graveyard. Basically, you summon Isolde, dump 4 of them into the graveyard, then special summon some other monsters and go into this, and then you get a very powerful beatstick. This is basically what they were going for when designing Isolde. So yeah, and yeah, this is usually ran at 2 or 3 in most Noble Knight builds. And their last monster is Sacred Noble Knight of King Artorigus. This is actually a rank 5, and yeah, it requires 2 level 5 Noble Knight monsters. And when this card is Xyz summoned, you can target up to 3 Noble Arms equipped spells with different names in your graveyard, equip those targets to this card. Once per turn you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card and target 1 other monster on the field, destroy that target. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target 1 level 4 or higher Noble Knight monster in your graveyard and special summon it. Yeah, this being rank 5 is supremely annoying due to the fact that the main deck only has 2 level 5 monsters and the Synchro monster is a 3rd level 5, and you're rarely using that Synchro monster if you manage to summon it in order to bring this thing out. And all you get is a slightly better previous Artorigus, but nothing too special, and yeah, it's really that, nothing that special. The first Artorigus is way better in my opinion because it's easier to summon and much more splashable. So yeah, you usually run this at 1 max if you really care about the level 5s in your main deck, and if you really care about this sort of effect, or if you have some nostalgic connections to it or something. And yeah, anyway, we've been mentioning these Noble Arms for quite a bit right now, so let's get into them, shall we? First up we have Noble Knights Archetype. I hope I really didn't butcher that name, but anyway, you can only control 1 of them, and you can only equip them to a warrior type monster. Once per turn you can target 1 set card your opponent controls. The equipped monster loses exactly 500 attack, and if it does, destroy that target. This attack loss remains even if this card leaves the field or the monster becomes unaffected by card effects. If this card is on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 warrior type Noble Knight monster you control, equip this card to that target. You can only use this effect Noble Knights Archetype once per turn. Not good. I mean, it only works on set cards, which can include monsters, but good luck finding that in this link focused meta. But anyway, yeah, it also focuses, I mean, it works on back row, which is which tends to be face up and activated because it's a floodgate, since battle traps are very hardly ran these days. And yeah, and the attack dropping effect is the cherry on top. Beautiful design choice here, Konami. Next up we have Noble Arms Excalibur. You can only control one of them. Equip only to a warrior type monster and it gains 500 attack. Once per turn you can gain 500 life points. If this face-up card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target one warrior type Noble Knight monster you control, equip this target to that equip this card to that target. You can only use this effect of Noble Arms Excalibur once per turn. Okay, so as we'll see later on, the re-equipping effect is the prime gimmick of these Noble Arms, and this is one of their first cards, and it's not good. It's one of the most basic attack boosts in the game. Not to mention that it makes you gain 500 life points once per turn, so it's a it's a much worse Neospatian and a Air Hummingbird, and yeah, it's not good. What else can I say? Next up we have Noble Arms Gallatin. You can only control one of them and equip only to a warrior type monster. It gains 1000 attack. During each of your standby phases, it loses 200 attack. If this face-up card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target one warrior type monster you control and equip it to that target, and you can only use this once per turn. Okay, I'll stop elaborating the re-equipping effect, but yeah, this is a alright card, but nothing too special, because it's an archetypal Stimpeak. And what an accomplishment. However, just like Stimpeak, since it can be equipped to any warrior monster, if I'm correct, Destiny Hero Dystopia is a warrior monster, which basically, with this losing 200 attack effect, you can actually get a free destruction effect of any card on the field with Dystopia once per turn. So yeah, not to mention Dystopia's attack actually resets to his normal original attack after the usage of this card, and upon activation with the 1000 attack you also get a pop with Dystopia. So yeah, I've gone to talk about Destiny Hero Dystopia for some reason, but yeah, that's the only real usage of this thing I can harbor, being used as destruction fuel for Destiny Hero Dystopia, and that's about it. As it goes in Noble Knights, well, yeah, it can turn them into legit beaters, but that's not very relevant if they don't get some better removal effects or something. Next up we have Noble Arms Clarent. I'm getting tongue wrapped. I really need to drink something. Equip only to a warrior monster. You can only control one of them, and once per turn you can pay 500 life points. The equipped monster can attack directly this turn. If this face-up card on the field is destroyed, you get the re-equip effect. So yeah. So far this is actually a very interesting and so far the best equip card we've seen, because first of all, if you combine it with Gallatin on something like, I don't know, one of their Xyz monsters, which most of the ones you want to run have 2000 attack or more. So yeah, well, you can also equip it with Archetype, King of the Noble Knights, and then equip this Gallatin and I don't know, Caliburn, and then you get Archetype becomes a 3500 attack beatstick, which can attack directly. Wonderful. So yeah, this is usually ran at 3 because, well, Noble Knights have pretty decent attack values when we're talking about in the aspect of a direct attacker. So yeah, a good card in that regard. And the next one we have Noble Arms of Destiny. You can only control one of them, of course, and you can only equip them to a warrior type monster. Once per turn, the equipped monster cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects. If this face-up card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, re-equip effect. And there we go. That's a Noble Arm equip spell we've been looking for. Some very formidable protection. Nice, brilliant. And yeah, this is usually the third card you actually equip instead of Caliburn onto Archetype, the King of the Noble Knights, and the other two are of course Gallatin and Clarent. And yeah, this is a very nice card indeed. Next up we have their final Noble Arms card, that being Noble Arms Excalibur. You can only equip it to a Noble Knight monster, and it cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects. During your turn, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one Noble Knight Xyz monster you control. Special summon from your extra deck one Noble Knight Xyz monster with a different name by using that monster as the Xyz material. This special summon is treated as an Xyz summon and then transfer the materials, and you can only use this effect once per turn. Okay, the only usage of this effect is consistently bringing out the rank 5 Xyz monster, and that's it. And just like the rank 5 Xyz monster, this is very rarely ran, as opposed to being the ultimate Noble Arms equip. I should have expected something like it makes him unaffected by a certain group of effects or something, like unaffected by monster effects. I would actually love the Eons more than this, but yeah, and not to mention this thing can only be equipped to a Noble Knight monster, which is another huge bump in its effect, a bad one. So yeah, not worth it. Alright, time for their field spell. Let's hope the field spell fixes every single problem the archetype has. No, it won't. Noble Knight of the Round Table is their field spell, and during your end phase you can activate each of these effects up to once per turn, depending on the total number of Noble Knight cards with different names in your graveyard and you control. 3 or more. Send one Noble Knight card from your deck to the graveyard. 6 or more. Special summon one Noble Knight monster from your hand, then you can equip one Noble Arms equip spell from your hand to that monster. 9 or more. Target one Noble Knight monster in your graveyard and add that target to your hand. 12. Draw one card. Unless you can somehow pull off the 12 effect on a frequent basis, which is not at all, this is not worth running at all. I mean, it gives you some of the most mediocre effects in the game, with some very hard and bizarre conditions you have to fulfill in order to get them. And not to mention, yeah, first of all, the archetype is not good at keeping field presence, and while the graveyard is most likely gonna be packed, the most you're gonna get is first, very rarely the second effect, and yeah, if you can manage to get any more than that, then good luck with that, because you're not going to be pulling them off consistently. And yeah, it's middle of the Synchro era field spell if I ever saw one. Next up we have Glory of the Noble Knights, the quick play. Target one Noble Knight monster you control and equip it with one equip spell from your deck, then you can equip to that target, and you can only activate this once per turn. This is usually run at 2 or 3 because it offers some nice consistency boosting by by equipping equip spells directly from the deck, and which is always appreciated. So yeah, 2 or 3 of these is usually fine. Next up we have Heritage of the Chalice. Add one Noble Knight monster or one Noble Arms card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. If your Noble Knight monster equipped with a Noble Arms equip spell is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, while this card is in your graveyard, you can add this card from to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn, and you can only use each effect once per turn. Always run 3 and never any less. This is an archetypal search card which adds Noble Knights and Noble Arms from your deck and graveyard to your hand, and not to mention that you can actually recycle it when a monster from the archetype gets destroyed by battle or card effect, which is gonna happen a lot when playing this deck, I can assure you. Really, I really don't need to say any more than run 3 of these and all time. Oh, it specifically needs to be destroyed by battle. Well, tough shit, it's gonna happen a lot, so yeah. Run 3 of these and never any less. And their last spell card is Last Chapter of the Noble Knights. If your opponent controls a monster and you control no monsters, you can target one Noble Arms equipped card and one appropriate Noble Knight monster in your graveyard, special summon that monster, and if you do, equip that equip spell from to that appropriate monster, and you can only activate this once per turn. A monster reborn, which couldn't be more specific if it thrived. Also, it sets up your equipping shenanigans, which will proceed to further your plays every 13 billion heliocycles, which is not very relevant. And yeah, if you run this, it's not more than 1. Goodbye. Next up we have Until the Noble Arms are needed once again. Well, they're always needed, so they won't be needed once again. They'll always be needed once again. In fact, anyway, it's their first trap card. And excavate cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of Noble Arms equipped spells you control. And if you do, add one of them to your hand. Also place the remaining cards on the top of your deck in any order. You can banish this card from your graveyard, except that in turn this card was sent to the graveyard. Special summon from your deck one Noble Knight monster with a different name from the cards you control or in your graveyard, and you can only use each effect once per turn. Use this effect once per turn. So yeah, this is actually a trap version of boards, and it happens to be a lot better than boards. However, the fact still remains that this thing is a trap card, and yeah, you know, trap cards are slower than spells by nature, so yeah. Still though, run at least 2 of these, because the archetype is very lacking in consistency in that regard, so yeah, every bit helps in that regard. And their last card is Avalon. Target 5 Noble Knight monsters in your graveyard, including at least 1 Artorigus monster and at least 1 Lance-Salen monster. Banish those targets, and if you do, destroy all cards on the field. You see, this is a very interesting card, because you usually wait for when you have enough materials to use this in order to you use it once when you're ready to finish the opponent off, Cowboy for Game style, or when you have that one monster which can deliver their final strike to the life points, because the usage of this thing is, again, if you're planning on consistent field nuking, then Black Rose Dragon is a much better option for you, because it does not have a very specific activation condition, and yeah, it works on it being special summon from the extra deck, so yeah, it doesn't clog up your main deck, which also kills away some consistency it might initially have. Okay, time for the grades. In terms of consistency, they are usually really fine. Theoretically, they are warriors, and they're light warriors to be exact. So they usually open up pretty well, but it tends to go downhill from there. And since Heritage of the Chalice is a very unique archetypal searching card, so yeah, it's not always a problem to get them into your hand and get your plays ready. So yeah, usually a 2 out of 3 I've been considering, but I'll actually be generous here because of Heritage of the Chalice is a ridiculous card, and give them a 3 out of 3. In terms of power, they usually don't hit very hard, because all of their monsters don't have very impressive attack values unless they're bumped up with equips. So yeah, you usually need some very specific equip shenanigans working on, mostly involving Artorigus, the Artorigus Xyz monster, which is usually the only types of plays they make, and the most they get out of it is usually 3500 attack, which is decent, but overall the damage values are not very high here, so I'm gonna give them a 2 out of 3. In terms of comeback ability, there's very little of it. Despite being warriors, they do have access to warrior returning alive and some other stuff which might help them with comeback, but it usually for them has to be very specific, because most of their comeback cards actually lock you into Noble Knights, which is not a very pleasant thing to be doing. So yeah, 1 out of 3 in terms of comeback, and when it comes to protection, there is none. The only form of protection is Noble Knight of Destiny, and the Noble Arms of Destiny, sorry, which is usually ran at 3 because it's a great protection effect, but if your opponent shuts down spell cards or negates it or anything else, gets rid of it by other means, it's irrelevant, so 1 out of 3 there. However, in terms of versatility, they're passable, nothing too amazing, because they don't have many decks which they can be actively ran in as tech choices or anything. However, you can only always run Photon Thrasher in the deck, because it's a light warrior which you can special summon onto the field. However, that shuts down the effect of the Medrot effect. It shuts him down, so watch out for that. Well, yeah. Versatility is fine. Overall, it's nothing too special, so I'm gonna give him a 2 out of 3 there. Yeah, Noble Knights, I finally got rid of them, the longest card effect text in the game. Although I frankly believe cubics now hold the honor of having the longest card effects in the game, because have you ever seen V-Jump's effect? It's a frail little level 1, and you haven't seen its gargantuan card text. It's ridiculous. And yeah, the most of the time cubics win because the opponents are just too lazy to have a cubic field study, because their effects are just so long. And that's pretty much why Noble Knights might have topped some times in tournaments and locals and everything, because their effects were very long and nobody gave a shit about reading them. So yeah, it was up to the player to explain what the card does, and then we were like, oh no, we're doomed. Well, in fact, you could have easily countered some of their strategies with some very specific removal which can shut them down instantly, and then they don't have a single chance to recover. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's done. That's it for today's archetype analysis, and make sure to tune in next time, as we'll be taking on a look at another 5Ds archetype. I have 2 more 5Ds archetypes, then 2 GX archetypes, and a Dual Monsters archetype to finish things off. And yeah, that Dual Monsters archetype is going to be a very long review. I have 56 cards on my belt, so yeah, it's gonna be a bit tight. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. And as usual, I'll upload the next vid whenever I can. See you all. Have a good day and peace.